If you're crashing at 2 p.m., feeling anxious or foggy for no reason, or constantly reaching for sugar to get through your day, this episode is for you. Today, we're diving into something most ADHD women are never taught: how what you eat can directly impact your nervous system, your stress response, and thus your ability to focus, stay motivated, and feel emotionally grounded. And before you worry, this isn't a diet culture guilt trip. This is a down-to-earth, science-backed conversation about what actually supports your ADHD brain and body, especially if you're also navigating perimenopause. We'll unpack how carbs, sugar, protein, fiber, fats, and hydration affect your executive function and mood regulation, and give you practical ADHD-friendly ways to nourish yourself without restriction or overwhelm. Be sure to listen. Welcome to the Self-Loved ADHD Woman's Way podcast. I'm your host, Jen Barnes. If you're an ADHD woman entrepreneur, ADHD adjacent, or ADHD-ish, you've come to the right place. We'll dive deep into the unique challenges you face, from the inner turmoil to the outer obstacles. We'll blend neuroscience, IFS, and somatic healing, and explore practical strategies to help you navigate the world of entrepreneurship with ADHD with greater ease and effectiveness. I'm glad you're here. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about a really important topic for ADHD because it has a huge impact on how we function with ADHD and what our days look like. And is actually a question that came from one of the members of my program, Ascend, the ADHD Women's Mastery Program. So I want to thank her for letting me know this is something people are wondering about. And it's this: what do we eat with ADHD? Or rather, how does what we eat impact our ADHD? Is it making it a lot worse for our pastry habit? Or even other types of, that spaghetti you like to have every night, or maybe that's just me. But really starting to get curious about how what we put in our mouth impacts our ADHD. Because here's the thing, it totally does. And I want to start out by saying, first of all, I am not a registered dietitian or a nutritionist. And so while I was a group fitness instructor for 17 years, and I've also studied ADHD and had some training around it, actually a decent amount of training around it, I also want to say that I am not a nutrition or dietetics expert. So this is not advice based on that. And I want to share some of what I've learned about in my own trainings, but also things I have learned in my life, because what we eat with ADHD matters a lot. And there's a few reasons why it matters so much, and I'll break those down in a moment. But first, I want to say, how would you even know that what you're eating is a problem for you? So if you find yourself feeling on edge and having a hard time focusing, and you realize you haven't eaten in about 3 or 4 hours, maybe 5, that's probably a piece of it. If you're crashing at 2 p.m., especially if you haven't had any protein, that's probably a piece of it. So to understand that what we eat and don't eat can influence our ADHD is really crucial. And that's what we're going to unpack. And we're going to talk about how to deal with that. So I want to first get into some of the science of it. So first and foremost, ADHD in general, we have sensitive nervous systems. And so when we have something that might tip us into our fight or flight response, we're more likely to get there and even more likely to stay stuck there, because one of the things about our brains is that when we are flooded with chemicals for the fight or flight response, one of which is norepinephrine, our brain doesn't clear norepinephrine at the same rate as others. Or when I say others, I mean neurotypical brains. And so because of that, we are more likely to get stuck in our fight or flight response. And if you've listened to any content from me, you know that when your nervous system is dysregulated, when you're in your fight, flight, freeze, or shutdown responses, your only priority, your body and your brain's only priority is survival. So getting yourself to focus on whatever work you're trying to do, whether it's for your business or your career, writing an email, crafting a social media post, whatever it is you're doing is going to be next to impossible to focus on or feel motivated around because the only thing that your brain cares about is survival. This comes from like our brains, this hasn't evolved. This is how our brains were back in the days of when we were trying to look for tigers and keep ourselves safe and our children safe. And our brain doesn't often know the difference between an actual tiger, or I guess bear is more realistic if unless you live in places that have tigers. But our brains have not updated since that time. So when we get into our fight or flight response or freeze response or shutdown response because of a current life stressor, our brain still goes into survival mode the same way it did millions of years ago when a bear or a tiger was chasing us. So that's what it is. And there's not much we can do about that, but we can learn how to work with it. And because our ADHD brains have that difference in them where we don't clear norepinephrine at the same state, we can get stuck in our fight or flight response longer and get there more easily. So we want to try and set up our days and weeks and months and lives in a way that doesn't keep putting us back there. And one of the ways that we can do that is by being selective and intentional around what we eat. Now, I'm not saying we can't eat fun food ever again, that you can never have a donut. To be clear, I don't think all or nothing works because a lot of times, and especially with neurodivergent folks and our persistent demand avoidance or PDA, a lot of us, if we're told we can't do something, we're like, oh yeah, watch me. So I think it's important not to all of a sudden think that, first of all, I'm saying it, but also not to say it to yourself. Yep, I can't have that anymore, because that's not what it's about. It's more about being intentional about the choices you're making and linking that up to what kind of day you want to have. So I also, before we get more into that, want to talk about another piece that is another layer, which is perimenopause. So if you're in perimenopause, what you eat also has a large impact on your ability to focus and brain fog, memory, things like that, because we already have so much going on in our perimenopausal brains and bodies. So if you're in perimenopause and have ADHD, then this is just what you eat is gonna matter that much more. So when your blood sugar drops, it triggers a stress response, which is usually the fight or flight response first. We don't go immediately into shutdown most times unless it's clear all hope is lost. So that means your body floods you with cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine, sometimes also called noradrenaline. And that can feel like anxiety, shakiness, irritability, trouble focusing, or sudden energy crash, brain fog. So ADHD brains, we know, are dopamine seeking because of our limited ability to access dopamine, because our dopamine actually gets cleared out faster. So it's like this double whammy situation. And the problem is sugar gives us that short-term boost, but then a crash later, which means more dysregulation. And then we get into this cycle of dysregulation. So raise your hand, and mine's high as can be on camera, is if you have had, maybe you would say, an addiction to sugar, or were really into sugar and have been into sugar most of your life. Yeah, like I'm known for having a scoop of ice cream after dinner every night, and sometimes that scoop is more than a scoop. But I've recently shifted that because of both ADHD and perimenopause. But everyone who knows me, and maybe who hasn't seen my updated eating habits, anyone who's lived with me knows that's what I come with. And I'm slowly shifting that because I'm seeing the impact. But all of us have probably tried to help our ADHD, not knowing we were, by eating sugar, because sugar does help in the short term. It's just that it doesn't stick around very long term. It's metabolized quickly. So it actually ends up being a net negative effect because we have such a big crash after, or we just have to keep eating more sugar, which isn't great because then we're in this cycle of dysregulation. So it's important to understand that that sugar that we crave is our attempt to try and help ourselves. So not to shame ourselves about it. It's just that it doesn't work the way that parts of us think it's going to work. And so that's why it becomes problematic. And like I said, with perimenopause, we're way more sensitive to blood sugar swings due to hormonal shifts. So it's even more important for us to be intentional about this. So I want to just say, I am in no way endorsing any one kind of diet. I don't necessarily believe in diets. I think there are ways to eat and be mindful and intentional about your eating that is intuitive and wise for where you're at. But I don't think going on a diet or restricting things for the sake of restricting them is necessarily essential or even a good idea. Yes, I am like 97% vegan, and I do that because I'm able to do it. My body's okay with it to help the environment and, well, protect the animals. So there's that. I don't know. I'll just share this total ADHD train track moment. I haven't eaten meat since, oh my gosh, 2012. And the one I miss, this is crazy, is pepperoni. Like, what a weird thing to miss. And I even saw some pepperoni recently on someone's pizza. And I was like, I could just steal a piece. And then I immediately see this image of this cute little pig and get really sad. And even though some of my clients who've grown up on farms in Minnesota, which is not totally uncommon here, have told me that pigs are actually quite vicious and mean, which I don't know. I still see that cute little piglet in my mind and I'm like, nope, can't do it. So I want to just name that I understand that, yes, I do restrict some of my food. I just find that works for my body, but doesn't work for everybody and every brain. So we do what we do. So at any rate, getting back to the situation about what's problematic. And I want to say it's not carbs. It's more the type of carbohydrates we're eating and the timing of it. So first I want to talk about types of carbohydrates. There's two main types that we talk about. One is refined carbohydrates and one is complex carbohydrates. So generally speaking, just as a rule of thumb, the refined carbohydrates come from processed food, but especially things like pastries, white bread, cereal, candy. It's the stuff that when you look on the label and you look at the dietary fiber, it's low. And when you look at the sugar, especially added sugar, it's high. And when I say high, we're talking more than 10 grams, like 20, 30. For some reason, 33 grams comes into my mind. I don't know what I was eating that was 33 grams, but I realized it and thought to myself, holy moly, that's not effective for me at this stage of life. So, and I'm not saying you can't do that. I just am working through perimenopause as well. So these refined carbs, what they do is they cause fast spikes and then crashes. And that equals brain fog and mood swings. So it's going to make it harder for you to focus when you eat those kind of refined carbohydrates. And then you might even be more sensitive or emotional than you typically are. So not the best idea. I'm not saying you can't have it, but just to know when you choose that, to recognize that perhaps after you're having those foods, especially if you don't have them coupled with protein, which we're going to talk about in a moment, it may be wise to not do that before a big presentation or before some really deep focus that you need to do. So the other type of carbohydrate that I mentioned, there were two main types, is complex carbohydrates or complex carbs. These tend to be things that occur more naturally, like oats, beans, quinoa, sweet potato. And these things, if they are packaged, which often aren't because they tend to be more natural, at least have high amounts of dietary fiber in them. So it would be like whole wheat bread or grain bread. I use red lentil pasta, and that has a lot of fiber in it. And it's still a processed food, which with ADHD and perimenopause processed foods, it's best if we try not to eat too many of them because it, again, can cause all these challenges. But at least if you're going to have it, we want to make sure that there's good, solid dietary fiber in it to help with digestion and to keep us from having that spike in energy and getting into our fight or flight response, which is going to make it really hard to focus and get stuff done. So these complex carbohydrates give us steady fuel and support focus. So when we have these, they can help us be able to focus better. And the reason is complex carbohydrates, because they tend to have more fiber, take longer to digest. Simple sugars, simple carbohydrates, refined carbohydrates aren't that hard for our body to digest, so they go through us like that. I even remember that from my group fitness days, talking about quick fuel is refined carbs. Long-term fuel is complex carbs. Although, to be fair, things have changed a little bit since recommending any kind of refined carbohydrate as fuel. But I digress. So the other thing I want to mention is when you have carbs completely alone, that can also put you in a stress response. And so if you notice yourself having only a carbohydrate, even oatmeal or even quinoa, you may find that you need to add something into it, like protein or a fat, because that will slow down the digestion even more and keep you from triggering, like having the blood sugar drop that then triggers the stress response that we talked about. So when you instead choose to eat complex carbohydrates with protein, fiber, and fat, that actually supports your nervous system. You're not going to tip into that fight or flight response because it's not stressful for your body to eat that way. So then what do? Well, it's essential for optimal ADHD health, right? And with perimenopause, to be mindful of what you're eating when. So I have oatmeal every morning, but I also put pecans in it and blueberries. But blueberries is actually more of a complex carbohydrate. There's fiber in them, and berries have a lower glycemic index, so they are less likely to spike your blood sugar. So that's awesome. Bananas, on the other hand, can spike your blood sugar, especially if they're closer to the super ripe range when they actually have higher sugar content, where if they're just past green, there's more fiber and less sugar in them, which is a tricky thing about bananas. They tend to taste the best in that in-between phase, which is more of an in-between sugar phase. It doesn't mean you can't eat bananas anymore. It just means you might combine it with almond butter, some other kind of nut butter, or something that has protein, nuts. You get the idea. So what can we do with ADHD? Like, how might we support our blood sugar, which then in turn supports our nervous system, which in turn supports our ADHD? And if you're perimenopausal, supports that as well. First of all, I just want to say for a moment, if you are going through perimenopause and you're wondering about food, I highly recommend Dr. Mary Claire Haver. She's got a YouTube channel and a couple books out, and she goes over how to eat effectively for perimenopause. And it's really good stuff. But not everyone with ADHD is perimenopausal. So I want to stick more to ADHD here. And again, remind you that this comes from my background as a group fitness instructor for 17 years, as well as my own personal experiences. So I in no way know what's best for you and if you have other medical conditions. So just be mindful. Talk to your doctor or a nutritionist or dietitian if you're unsure. So it's important that at every meal or snack, you get some kind of protein. The reason is, one, like we said before, we don't want to spike blood sugar. Now you are getting into one of your protective responses and making it harder to focus and get stuff done. And then secondly, when you have a protein at every meal, you are better able to sustain your attention. That's one of the things I learned from Dr. David Noel in my ADHD training, I think last summer, 2 summers ago, I can't remember now. But it is important with ADHD that we're having protein with whatever we're eating or that it's in there. So what are some ideas for protein? Eggs, yogurt, but let me say Greek yogurt that doesn't have a lot of sugar added, because some of those yogurts, I used to love yogurt. I remember, wow, this was when I was still teaching group fitness and newer in the teaching yoga space. I remember I was at Lifetime Fitness and we, as a staff member there, we got to have a free assessment of everything to be kind of test subjects, but then also be able to tell people what it was like. And they tested my VO2 max and other things about I don't know if they tested blood sugar per se, but they were testing things and how I was burning fuel And because I was having so many simplex or refined carbohydrates, they were like, yeah, this has to change. And one of the biggest culprits they had an issue with was I was having yogurt with berries every morning, but it was regular berries. And I think I had some almonds in there at the time. And it still wasn't enough because the amount of sugar, I had no idea the amount of sugar that was in that yogurt. It was so high. It was like 33 grams of sugar for 8 ounces of yogurt. Maybe it was not quite that high, but it was insanely high. So mostly I was having sugar for breakfast that happened to have, and I couldn't have dairy at the time, so it was some kind of coconut milk yogurt. But my point is I learned the hard way by that not working and being told by a nutritionist who was overlooking all of my health data, who said, yeah, this is way too much sugar. So when I say yogurt, I'm talking Greek yogurt. This morning I had, I think it's oat milk Greek yogurt with no sugar added, and it's unsweetened from Trader Joe's. And I put some blueberries in it and a little bit of granola that has things that have protein in it and also is lower sugar. And that has been fantastic. Sometimes I'll do that. Sometimes I'll do the oatmeal. So those are great ideas. Certainly, if you're an egg eater or you want some kind of meat and egg with your breakfast, that works too. The thing that is killer, I used to love waffles in the morning. And before I got to my banana chocolate chip muffin phase in high school, I would have Eggo waffles with syrup. And really, I would have syrup with my, or how do you say that? I would have Eggo waffles with my syrup, right? Rather than Eggo waffles with syrup. So anyway, because it was mostly sugar. And then I would be hungry and struggling to focus before lunch because it was all that sugar just burned through me. So when you're thinking about what to eat for your first meal in the morning or whenever that is, be intentional about making sure there's some protein there because protein helps with dopamine production and sustains energy. And we want that throughout our days. Also, it's essential that every meal or snack has some kind of dietary fiber. So veggies have a lot of dietary fiber. Vegetables are a great solution. Whole grains, so some of the things we talked about, like quinoa or oats or beans, are things that have whole grains. If you're going to do bread, wheat bread, or some kind of bread that has grains, and you look at the dietary fiber and it's more than just a gram or two, that is essential. Oh, and berries, I should say, like I said before, berries work. But these are essential because they slow digestion and help gut health. So it's very important because we know that gut health is just as important as brain and heart health. We actually now in the field of mental health talk about having a second brain in our gut. And when we are not taking care of our gut health, then we can get a leaky gut, and that then influences the rest of our body's systems, including our heart, but also including our brain, and thus our ADHD. So digestive support is really helpful, and you get that from fiber. Healthy fat. Healthy fat is so important because it can help regulate blood sugar and is great hormone support. And Mary Claire Haver talks about healthy fat all the time. I've not always loved avocados. I never had an avocado till I was in my mid-30s because I thought it looked gross because it was green. Yeah. At any rate, somehow I became vegan, mostly vegan. At any rate, I tried it and thought to myself, where have you been all my life when I had guacamole that first time? So there was that. But avocados are something that Dr. Mary Claire Haver talks about all the time for perimenopause. She talks about eating like an avocado a day. I usually eat at least a half to a full avocado a day, either with beans that I have with my lunch or in the evening, if I have a sandwich or something, there's always avocado on it. And so avocado is a really nice, healthy fat, not just for perimenopause though, but for ADHD. Also, olive oil, nuts are great ones. And of course, you have to find things that you're not allergic to. So if you're allergic to these things, work with your doctor or dietitian or probably a nutritionist or dietitian to help you find things that work for what goes on with you and your medical conditions. Last but not least, hydration. This is one that is so essential. And I am pretty obsessive about water. I have been most of my life. especially after living in Colorado for 9.5 years, where it was super dry all the time. And I would get almost panicked if I didn't have a water bottle with me at every single minute, which may be overkill, but I just had to have water. And to some degree, I actually sometimes wonder if drinking out of my water bottle is me stimming. And I wonder how much of that is subconscious, that I know if I get dehydrated, I struggle to focus. I get really uncomfortable in my body. And it's true. When we are dehydrated, even mild dehydration can spike cortisol. And then remember, that worsens focus. So it is essential to make sure that you are hydrated. And there have been all kinds of recommendations on how much you're supposed to drink based on your body size. And way back when I first started in the fitness industry in the 90s, it was 8-ounce glasses of water every day. Well, that doesn't make any sense for someone who's my size. I'm pretty petite. I'm only 5'2.5", and someone who's 6'5", right? That just doesn't make any sense. So the best rule of thumb that I've heard more recently towards the end of my group fitness career, as well as from dietitians, nutritionists, and medical doctors and nurse practitioners, is watch your pee. If your urine is a nice pale yellow, you're probably hydrated. If it's darker than lemonade, you need to get some water in you. If it's like apple juice, yeah, you're getting seriously dehydrated. So start to pay attention to what that feels like and always have water on you, because again, not having water, being dehydrated, is going to actually make it harder to focus. And to remember, there are things that actually increase dehydration even if you're drinking water. Coffee, right? Caffeine. So soda would do it. Caffeine. So those kind of things will definitely actually make you more dehydrated. So if you're doing those things, you're going to need more water. And if you're working out, you're going to need more water. So it's important to think about that and have access to water regularly so that you're not inadvertently making your ADHD worse. So here are some red flags that blood sugar is dysregulating you. So number one, skipping meals or starting the day with just coffee. I get it. And here's the thing. Like, I sometimes do a little bit of intermittent fasting, something Dr. Mary Claire Haver talks about in one of her books, for perimenopause. However, I actually am not super hungry until around 9:45 most mornings, just because of how I naturally do my day. I don't start work till 10. So I get it if you're not eating much for breakfast. But I definitely recommend having some kind of meal, whether you want to call it breakfast or lunch, before you start your workday. Because remember, if you don't get that fuel into your body, that good focus fuel, like protein, fiber, healthy fats, then it's going to be very hard for you to focus and get stuff done. So if you're going for more than 45 hours without food, which to me sounds crazy, I can't imagine missing that eating for that long. Obviously, I have some privilege there. I have access to food right now, so that's awesome. But with ADHD, we know sometimes we can get so focused we forget to eat, and then we get out of the habit of it. So that's going to exacerbate your ADHD. If you're relying on foods like snack food, like crackers, fruit, or granola bars that don't have protein or fat with them, it's definitely going to make it harder for you to focus and feel motivated. If you find yourself craving sugar when you're tired, stressed, bored, or overstimulated, that's a sign that you're probably having too much sugar, and that sugar is probably dysregulating you and making it harder to focus and get stuff done more often than you realize. And last but not least, and boy, do I know this one, because before anyone used the word hangry, this was 20 years ago, I had a boyfriend who used to say I would get hangry, and I had never heard anyone use that word. This was like in, I don't know, he was like, maybe it was like 2008, so not quite 20 years ago, but he would be like, you get hangry, and it's hard. And he wasn't wrong. I don't get as hangry now, but I definitely notice shifts in my blood sugar, and I always have since I was young. I never knew why I was so sensitive to it. Now I realize because it's not just how neurotypical people experience low blood sugar, it's how ADHD people do. which our whole nervous system gets dysregulated. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but personally, when I get hungry, I also feel really anxious, AKA my fight or flight response. So sometimes I would have a hard time ascertaining, am I anxious or am I hungry? Because they can look so much the same. So if you find yourself hangry, shaky, foggy, or anxious like mid-afternoon, that's a sign that you're not eating in a way that supports your ADHD brain, and you're probably triggering yourself into your fight or flight response, thus making it harder to focus and feel motivated. And so instead, what do? Well, instead of having pastry or toast alone, try eggs with avocado toast on whole grain. Have the bread that you use be whole grain. And you can tell when you look at the dietary fiber, and I don't know what the min is, but I usually try and go for at least 4 grams of dietary fiber if I'm going to have some kind of toast. If it's got like 1 or 2, usually that's not enough for me. I need more dietary fiber than that because I notice it'll go right through me. Like my body will digest it so fast, it feels like I didn't eat. And then it's hard to focus, like we said, get hangry, all that stuff. Instead of just fruit, try fruit and almond butter or sun butter or whatever it is that you like. The reason I don't say peanut butter is my understanding, and this it just comes from reading, so feel free to fact check this. My understanding is that peanut butter can cause inflammation or contribute to it. And so if you're in perimenopause, we try and keep inflammation down because that's one of the challenges that comes up for us. So that's why I don't say peanut butter. But if you love peanut butter and it doesn't bother you, you can do apple with peanut butter. Granola bar. So instead of having that granola bar, try some unsweetened Greek yogurt with chia and berries. That can be lovely. And then that afternoon coffee with no other food at all, try a protein smoothie or a handful of seeds or oats. If you start to make some of these shifts, it can really make a difference, not in just how you feel in your body, but also with your ADHD, your ability to focus, feel motivated, and actually start and complete tasks. So just remember, when you're adding or trying something new around anything in your life, it's important to start small. So I'm not recommending that today you immediately cut all sugar out of your diet. I hope that's not what you're hearing, but rather start to experiment with what it would be like to just even shift your first meal of the day. See what that's like. See what it's like to shift how you eat throughout the day and what you do for your evening meal. And see if you start to notice a difference. Give it some time. You could even, if you want to, you could even do like a food journal and notice what it's like now. Do another couple days of eating how you eat and then shift so you actually see that your effort is making a difference. You might have to scale how good you felt you could focus, recognizing that our focus and motivation does fluctuate naturally, both as women with our cycles, but then also different days are just different for us depending on what's going on in our lives. So, all right. What I want you to go from here thinking is that food is actually a form of nervous system regulation, especially with ADHD. So when your blood sugar is in balance, you are going to have more of a regulated nervous system and improved focus and motivation. Stabilizing meals can reduce the number of your fight, flight, freeze, or shutdown episodes. And again, like I said, start small. Even one balanced snack a day makes a difference. And before we go, I just want to share an aside, something that I learned, oh my gosh, maybe 4 years ago, because let's see, it was in person. No, it was 2017. Oh, good grief. 8 years ago at the first or second annual conference of the Center for Trauma and Embodiment, which is the organization that holds my trauma center, trauma sensitive yoga training, which by the way, they just had their annual conference again. It's always in April. Now it's online though, and anyone can go. It's really low cost. It's always amazing. They just share so many wonderful, insightful things. So if you're any kind of healer and care about any kind of somatic healing, it's just really beautiful. They bring in people from different cultures. And then on the last day, we all do some movement together from one of the cultures of the speakers. So one year we did flamenco. One year we had some native to America, like indigenous people of America teach us some steps from their kind of dance. We've done flamenco. I don't know if I said that one. This year it was Irish dance. So that was kind of fun, especially for me as a tap dancer. So anyway, this isn't an advertisement for that. I just thought I was talking about it. But one of the things I learned at their annual conference back in 2017 is that when we're talking about food, a really essential shift to make is to talk instead of about healthy food and junk food, start to get in the habit of saying nutrient dense food and fun food and just see what that feels like for you. Because a lot of times when we're like, oh, I ate all junk food, then we start to shame ourselves. You can just even feel that energy coming off of me when I say it. We end up shaming ourselves, making it hard to then focus on nutrient dense foods. Plus, healthy foods to some people sound kind of annoying or not fun. And they are fun. It's just we want to eat more nutrient dense foods. And that's what this episode has been all about, to help your ADHD. So, all right. I hope you got a lot out of this. If you're not subscribed or following this podcast already, please do. It really helps me know that this is important for people to continue. And I would love it if you comment and share this with others so that I can help more ADHD women just like you. All right. Hope you're doing well. I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.